Sometimes you find yourself confronted by something so utterly jaw-dropping that you actually end up beginning to question the very fabric of reality.
A lot of people wondering, why does this impossible meat taste so much like meat? And it is a conspiracy theory, and I know you're a theorist, that there may be human meat in the Impossible Burger.
Now, the term conspiracy theory is exceptionally broad and encompasses so many ideas and events. And it's important to recognize that something shouldn't be disregarded simply because it is a conspiracy theory. However, for many conspiracy theorists, well, they find themselves doing the opposite. They become more inclined to believe a conspiracy theory is true because it is a conspiracy theory. And then sadly, the consequence of this is you end up falling deeper and deeper into more extreme beliefs, which become further and further detached from reality. Now, I already know that I'm going to get some comments about how I'm brainwashed because I don't think the Earth is a floating disc, or how I'm in the pocket of the global elite because I'm not crying myself to sleep because of a benign city planning idea called a 15-minute city.
The media's covering up! The Biden crime family stealing this election! The media's covering up! We want our freedom for the world! Give us our freedom, Joe Biden! Your Biden's covering up this election! He's stealing it!
Where were we? What was the last question?
But ironically, unsubstantiated and extreme theories that are easily disprovable actually do more harm than good for the themes that conspiracy theorists seek to represent. Now, corporations and governments do terrible things. They often try to hide what they do and do them covertly and secretly. Accepting this is not an extreme thing to accept. However, some of the most prevalent and extreme conspiracies that now exist seek to serve the interests of the most powerful on the planet, and are also a direct attack on science and evidence, which is why in this video we're going to be looking at how conspiracy theories overlap with veganism and actually cause it considerable harm, including looking at things like alternative diets that are not rooted in evidence. So because science and evidence are incredibly important to me, as they should be for everyone, it is for this reason that I've partnered up with Complement, who are sponsoring today's video. Complement's Essential Supplement is a science-backed multivitamin specifically catered to help you optimize a plant-based diet. Their supplements are third-party tested, and they also publish the results of the tests on their website. Now, it's important to recognize that all diets, plant-based or not, can have nutritional gaps, and so Complement Essential contains the essential nutrients that can be more challenging to get from just plants alone, including things like B12, DHA, and vitamin D. This means that by taking Complement Essential, we can look after our own health and also eat the diet that has been scientifically shown time and time again to be the best for the planet, and is also, of course, the most ethical when it comes to animals. Complement also has a range of products including protein powders, gut nurturing powders, and a daily greens powder. And all of the packaging is compostable, meaning you can simply compost the packaging once you've finished with it. Complement is also offering 15% off all their products when people use the code ED15. So make sure to click the link in my description to find out more about Complement Essential, as well as their other products, and to get your hands on their products for yourself. So a huge thank you to Complement for sponsoring today's video. But now let's turn our focus away from a science and data-driven company and towards theories that actually fly in the face of science and data, such as conspiracy theories about the environment. Now, the conspiracy theory that climate change isn't real and is an orchestrated plot by a global elite is an interesting theory when you actually consider whose best interests it serves. Now, let's take into account that many of the arguments that are used by climate change deniers are easily debunkable pieces of pseudoscience, which were actually created and spread by the fossil fuel industries themselves. So many of the arguments used by climate change deniers come from the industries that have vested interests in people not believing the climate science. So now you have an extreme conspiracy theory that actually aids the largest, richest, and most politically powerful companies on the planet. And if that wasn't confusing enough, astonishingly, politicians who accept hundreds of thousands, even millions of dollars from these industries are now being positioned as defenders of freedom and drainers of the so-called swamp. In the UK, we even have people like Jacob Rees-Mogg and Nigel Farage who have somehow been positioned as anti-establishment. And the fact that conspiracy theorists seem to be more likely to have theories about environmental groups than they do about BP, Chevron, Exxon, and the rest speaks to how many conspiracies are less about challenging power and more about cementing it. Take this clip from Piers Corbyn, a conspiracy theorist who crashed an environmental group's church service to shout at them and tell them that they're doing the work of the devil.
You are selling lies. Man-made climate change does not exist. You are working for the devil.
Now, this goes back to the point I was making earlier. We know that huge corporations like BP engage in unethical and shady behavior, and we know that politicians accept money from these companies to allow them to continue and are, of course, susceptible to the lobbyists that represent them. And yet, within many conspiracy circles, it's the activist groups, climate scientists, and academics whose motivations are deemed most suspect. This also follows how the politics of many of these theories have now changed, and how many of these more extreme conspiracy theories are deeply tied in with right-wing ideology. While historically distrust of governments and powerful industries have been tied in with left-wing politics, and often, of course, drew on real examples of corruption, far-right ideology weaponizes a different type of distrust, this time placed on academics, experts, and so-called elites, and ties this distrust in with extreme conspiracy theories. Now, Piers from that clip seems to believe that actually BP and others like them are the ones trying to save the planet. One of the arguments he shouts at the environmentalists is that plants use CO2 to grow, so we need more CO2. This argument is tied into something called global greening, which is the argument that increased carbon dioxide is good because it can increase global greening, which relates to the amount of plants and also the number of leaves on plants and trees globally. This idea was popularized by a documentary that was produced and distributed by the coal industry. The idea ignores the fact that two things, of course, can be true at once. Increased CO2 levels can lead to an increase in global greening and can also lead to an increase in atmospheric CO2 levels, which cause global warming and the other climate issues that we sadly currently face. Also, bear in mind that global greening relates to agricultural land as well. But while fields of animal feed might be included within the concept of global greening, it's clearly outlandish to claim that fields of animal feed are good for this reason, especially when animal farming is the leading driver of deforestation and habitat loss. Ironically, the global greening argument relies on satellite imagery taken by NASA, so for conspiracy theorists, this is a pretty awkward one. And NASA actually a legitimate organization that's in space taking imagery of our spherical planet, or is the Earth flat and NASA is simply protecting the Antarctic ice wall and fabricating satellite imagery? And if NASA are in on this huge global conspiracy and the satellite imagery they provide is fabricated, why would they create fabricated satellite imagery showing global greening, which could be weaponized and used by conspiracy theorists? Wouldn't they do the exact opposite? Now, here's my 2 cents, and call me tinfoil hat crazy, but perhaps NASA is legit. The Earth is spherical, there has been some global greening, and we are in a climate crisis. Often the logical conclusion is the correct one, but then again, as a Freemason who calls Bill Gates daddy, I would say that, wouldn't I? That's a joke. Or is it?
We want our freedom for the world!
Conspiracy theories such as climate change denial allow companies who act shadily and secretly to have less accountability placed on them, and it creates social division that doesn't help the public, but instead actually helps the very people conspiracy theories usually are about casting suspicion on. The same is true of anti-vegan conspiracies, which serve the interests of the meat, dairy, and egg industries that also have a long history of corruption and harm, which brings us on nicely to the more specific links between veganism and conspiracies. Now, this video is not just about anti-vegan conspiracies, but also about how conspiracy theories perpetuated by vegans are actually harmful to veganism as a whole. In a previous video, I discussed how spirituality can be an enemy to veganism, citing how pseudoscientific and spiritual views can lead to ex-veganism. But we can actually see more and more examples of this within so-called conspirituals, a term used to describe New Age and pseudoscientific wellness beliefs becoming intertwined with conspiracy theories. You see, the thing is, before veganism was mainstream, many conspiracy theorists were brought over to veganism precisely because it was fringe. It was a way of taking a stand against the system and casting suspicion on what we are told. It was a way of defining yourself as being different from the crowd, or sheeple. In the same way that diet and wellness are tied in with conspiracy theories now, the same has been true for a long time, and that connection actually brought people over to veganism. This is why veganism has often been tied in with diets like raw veganism, fruitarianism, and the alkaline diet, all of which are substantiated with claims that are pseudoscientific and tied into things like naturalistic fallacies, conspiracy theories, and New Age spirituality. Take this post, for example, from a person who also promotes the alkaline diet as well, and the post is titled, as you can see, The Global Warming Lie. Right at the bottom, it says that the planet is heating up naturally through a planetary ascension process, not global warming. The person wants "do not buy the BS," which is actually pretty ironic. There's also David Wolf, one of the more prominent and well-known raw foodists, who's also a flat earther, among other things, and John Rose, another raw foodist, who is also a Holocaust denier, among other things. Or you get people like the scarily popular medical medium, someone whose diet protocols are plant-based, but are deeply anti-scientific. The guy literally literally claims that a spirit visited him and gave him the ability to scan bodies for disease by sight.
I'm just gonna take a look straight here. I'm talking to spirit, so just going through every organ, looking for the problem. With you, it's definitely the liver. You have really high deposits of copper. I know it probably sounds so far-fetched, right?
No, I believe in it.
So now he prescribes his dietary protocols on people by channeling this spirit, which tells him what's wrong with people. I mean, what could possibly go wrong? Presumably nothing, right, if some mystical spirit is able to diagnose illness so easily. For instance, I'm sure of someone who developed a friendship with a medical medium and even did assistant work for him, and whose family had a history of cancer, and who also had gene mutations correlated to an increased risk of developing breast cancer. Well, I'm sure if they developed a lump on their breast, medical medium with his spirit would be able to tell it's breast cancer, right? I think we all sadly know the answer to that question and what eventually happened to that poor lady. So what do you think medical medium thinks about things like, I don't know, let's say chemtrails?
We're also talking in code. Major code today.
I think we all know the answer to that question too. You see, medical medium is such a quack that when he goes for a walk in the park, people try and feed him bread. Although, side note, please don't try and feed ducks bread. Now, this is not me saying that everyone who subscribes to these diets also believes in these other things. Someone can eat a raw plant-based diet and not believe in everything else I've just referenced. However, for a long time, variations on plant-based diets, such as raw veganism, were the alternative diets of conspirituals. These are people who came to eating plants because of their conspiratorial thinking, and their influence brought other people of a similar mindset to eating plants too. However, this has begun to change, and for two main reasons. Firstly, if you're eating a woo-woo variation of a plant-based diet that is not grounded in science but grounded in New Age dogmatism and conspiracy, and you eat an unhealthy diet as a consequence, well, don't be surprised when you end up not feeling so good. I mean, it's hardly rocket science. Although, then again, rocket science only really works if you believe in gravity.
Well, gravity's still technically a theory.
You also get vegans who think everything can be cured from eating organic plants, who view nature as some divine, unquestionable entity. And as a consequence, supplements in Western medicine are an affront to the divinity of nature. The problem here is also that by approaching plant-based diets from a pseudo-scientific perspective, you also risk going back to eating animal products because of the same reason. I mean, why are so many of the highest profile ex-vegans those who used to extol the virtues of raw veganism and things like long water fasts? Why is it that some of the earliest carnivores are also crazy conspiracy theorists who used to be raw plant eaters and then transitioned to eating raw meat and organs? And this is how conspiracy theories that we may turn a blind eye to initially because, hey, at least these people are eating plants, right, actually become damaging to veganism and importantly to the animals. If people are eating plants because they think it's impossible for disease to exist in the body when you're eating an alkaline diet, or because raw plants will help them reach the next level of consciousness, that rationalization is built in a flimsy stack of cards that can come crashing down at any point. Take Tim Sheaf. He was a urine-drinking flat earther. He spoke highly of eating raw, of fruitarianism, of month-long water fasts. Him announcing he was no longer vegan meant he was invited onto national television to talk about it. To this day, he is still referenced in articles criticizing veganism. Or what if they don't quit, such as Zana Samsonova, the fruitarian and raw plant eater who died because of her diet? Not only did she die because of this, but reporting called her a vegan influencer. And then what about this headline? Vegan mother jailed for life after 18-month-old son starved to death on diet of raw fruits and vegetables. And because of things like this, vegan parents who are doing everything right are told that they're child abusers. And this myth that children can't be vegan persists. Children can be vegan. It just requires the parents to believe in actual science. Sadly, these people are a danger to themselves, to children, and of course to veganism. And we might think that these alternative diets are not related to conspiracy theories, but they are deeply tied into them. They're about questioning Western medicine, about falling into naturalistic fallacies, about a distrust in experts in science, about how cures are being hidden from us. This pseudoscience and these wider conspiracies are an enemy of veganism, an enemy of rationality, and a direct affront to our intellectual capabilities. Many people now place more trust in low-quality pixelated Facebook and Instagram posts than they do science and experts. But in recent years, something else has begun to change. Now, the narrative used to be, hey, you know you've been lied to about plants, But now the narrative is, hey, you're being lied to about meat. Meat is actually a superfood, and it's the best thing you can eat. And guess what? It's not the meat that's bad for you. It's actually plants. Plants, well, they're trying to kill you.
It turns out that the plants contain the chemicals that do more warfare than that cow's gonna give you when you eat it. So ultimately, it's hard to kill a cow, but that's the very best for you. It's easy to kill kale, but it's the worst thing for you. They kill you from the inside out.
And so interestingly, now there's been a complete 180. Carnivore influencers now peddle pseudoscience and drum up fear by linking veganism with wider conspiracy theories about the World Economic Forum and Bill Gates and how we're going to be subjugated with plants and bugs.
Bill and the World Economic Forum, like globalist reptilian people, are so desperate to get people to stop eating meat. It just makes me more like I believe more than ever that meat is important to eat, because I think they want to weaken people, because weak people are easier to control. If you keep a vital protein source away from people, they're going to be weak.
They position themselves as warriors against tyranny, standing up to defend humanity against our oppressive overlords who wish to feminize us with soy and who want to take farmers' lands for the Great Reset. We now have grifters like Tucker Carlson and Jordan Peterson taking advantage of these new narratives to feed their audiences with yet more misinformation and fear-mongering.
Plants and bugs for you and your children, peasants. And the sooner you get accustomed to it, or else, the better.
The irony is conspiracy theorists talk about Project Fear and how the everyday person is a victim of Project Fear while spending hour after hour absorbing the most terrifying content you can think of. And because more extreme conspiracy theories are kind of like a gravitational pull, they begin to draw in lots of things within them, which is how we end up with conspiracy theories about Bill Gates putting microchips in plant-based burgers or how Impossible Foods use actual human flesh. And so now we have the narrative that we should eat meat because the experts, academics, and scientists tell us that we shouldn't. And so while it used to be that the fringe nature of plant-based diets brought some people over to it, the opposite is now true. Because veganism is mainstream now, and because governments, organizations, academics, and experts are slowly beginning to recognize the need for changing how we eat, well, meat has now become the food choice of the conspiracy theorist. So now you hear about the vegan agenda being pushed by the global elite and how eating meat has become a symbol of resistance. But these broader ideas are of course not new. Rallying against the elites or the cosmopolitan or against academics is a tried and tested method for those who wish to antagonize the social fabric and boost their own notoriety. Because hey, if the evidence contradicts what you want to be true, you have two options: challenge the way you think or attack the evidence. Oh, the WHO said red meat is a class 2 carcinogen and processed meat is a class 1 carcinogen because of a review of 800 studies. Oh, and the UN's recent IPCC report, which involved over 780 scientists analyzing over 66,000 peer-reviewed pieces of research, wanted to recommend a plant-based diet as a way to protect the environment? Yeah, nice try, George Soros. This is why I only trust chiropractors. And this is where ethical vegans who also believe in these conspiracies find themselves with a significant amount of cognitive dissonance to contend with. They believe in the conspiracies about global elites and new world orders, but also believe that veganism is good and that a plant-based diet is the way forward. But how many of these vegans will turn their back on veganism as the conspiracies they subscribe to begin more and more to include veganism and plant-based diets? The problem is that while a true skeptic is led by evidence, extreme conspiracy theories distort evidence and distort reality. The more science showing the health and environmental benefits of a plant-based diet is published, for example, and the more support it gets from the public, from experts, and from governments, well, the more these anti-vegan views will be solidified in the minds of conspiracy theorists. As soon as you make experts and mainstream acceptance the enemy, the more entrenched you become in your views about something as that thing becomes more intellectually and scientifically valid. We're vegan, of course, for ethical reasons, but veganism is supported by science and data as well, and that goes into our decision-making as vegans driven by ethics and rationality. And so where does this leave us? As conspiracy theories continue to grow and social media continues to amplify misinformation and disinformation, what does that mean for movements grounded in rationality, science, and moral integrity? How do we continue to combat this as it bleeds over into our politics and into populist political rhetoric? Conspiratorial language and dog whistling is now very much mainstream. Take these comments from the UK MP Jacob Rees-Mogg, who criticised the WHO, the European Court on Human Rights, and COP, calling them international cabals and quangos, telling hundreds of millions of people how to lead their lives. And he warned about elites. Or take this clip from GB News and the deliberately vague references to some kind of secret malevolent force.
Now, I've got viewers and listeners who are vegan and they love it. No problem. If that is your choice, go for it. But in time, I fear it's the authorities that will be choosing what we all eat. And it will be soya, burgers, vegan bacon, and vegetarian lasagna. Welcome to hell.
These more subtle insinuations are rife within mainstream media now, but still contribute to the overarching theories that fuel conspiracy theorists. I also haven't discussed the farmer protests in the EU, and even though they're not strictly being driven by conspiracy theories, conspiracy theorists are jumping on proposed farming regulations and using them as evidence to push their anti-science, often anti-Semitic and anti-vegan conspiracy rhetoric. But even though we live in a world where logic, science, and intellectual integrity are derided and ignored by many in favor of ideological dogmatism and self-centered grandstanding in pursuit of notoriety and social influence, and even though we are now being told by some to distrust science, ethics, and experts, the truth is, change is happening. Because even though for some, veganism will be dragged into this toxic worldview, for most, it will continue to become more and more the rational, scientifically grounded, and ethically right thing to do. Alright guys, that brings us to the end of the video. Thank you so much for watching. I really hope that you enjoyed it. I hope you found it interesting, maybe a little bit provocative. Well, anyway, let me know down below in the comments, as you always do, what you thought about what it is that I have said in this video. As always, thank you so much. And finally, of course, a huge thank you to Compliment for sponsoring today's video. Alright guys, I'll see you in the next video.